Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast, the show for firearm enthusiasts who like to shoot, train, carry, and compete. Get ready for some shooting insight, firearm and accessory reviews, and of course, insight on concealed carry. And now, broadcasting from behind enemy lines in the From Concealment studio, it's Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams.
Hey, Freedom Nation, this is Pete Mitchell.
And I am feeling free.
Nice. So I got a story I got to share with you, man.
Let's hear it.
I was actually a little bit concerned yesterday. Yesterday was Sunday. My son and I decided we were going to go see the 1999 version of The Matrix because it was showing at the local theater, and he'd never seen it before. And I'm like, the fourth one's coming out this month. I kind of want to see if he will get into the trilogy, so that way he'll go see that movie with me. So because of California's mask mandate, I refuse to go to LA County, which is the closest to me. It's literally a mile away. But LA County, you got to wear masks, all this crap. And there's a closer theater, right? I mean, much closer. The one I usually go to or went to before the pandemic it's in LA County. So there's one in Garden Grove, which is not that close. I mean, Garden Grove is technically close to me, but it's a big city. And so it's like 25 minutes away. And Garden Grove is known as Garbage Grove here in California. Not a good area.
Yeah.
Right. Just saying it's not. It's a part of Orange County that's not thought highly of. In fact, anybody who lives in West Garden Grove likes to tell everyone, I'm in West Garden Grove. Like somehow it's better, but it's like, no, you're in Garden Grove. So we go to this Regal theater there. And of course, I'm packing, right? Because like I'm going to go out in public and I'm going to go into Garbage Grove without a gun on me. Like, yeah, who wouldn't, right? I mean,
yeah.
So we go to the Matrix and not too many people in there. I mean, obviously not too many people go to the movies, and then who wants to go see a 20-year-old movie? But it's one of those $5 jobs, right? So I'm like, dude, whatever. This is cool. And almost like as soon as, I don't know if it was the trailer right before it or maybe the movie had started, this whole group of kids come in. And they're being loud and obnoxious and F this, F that. And I'm like, dude, seriously? I'm like, please don't tell me you're going to be like this in the movie. These kids were so bad. They're jumping over the seats. They're throwing crap at each other. They've got some little like squeaker toy that makes a mooing sound, or I don't know what it was, a duck sound. I have no idea what it is. And they're right in the middle of the movie. And people are getting pissed. Like, justifiably so. Like, we all paid money to see a movie, not to hear you jackasses doing whatever you're doing. Mm-hmm. And they're like literally stomping up and down the stairs, leaving, coming back in. And I mean, it's like getting bad. And there was somebody who was sitting like right near him, and he's getting really pissed. And so he goes out, tells the staff, you got to do something about these kids. Comes back in, sits down, staff comes in. But of course, now the kids are like, perfect. Right. Because, let's be good. And so, staff then leaves. And then the kids are like, literally, they're jumping over the chairs. Like, these are the nice recliner chairs. And they're like jumping from row to row to row. And I'm getting pissed. And I'm not the only one. Right. Because I'm not. And all of a sudden the kids leave and they come back in. They're F this, F that. And I just yell full bore. Like, I've got a really deep voice when I yell. I'm like, get out. And they're like, I'm like, get out. And of course, they're like, oh, man, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, dude, you punk kids. And so then the guy leaves again, gets the staff. But now they're all sitting in a whole nother row. The staff guy comes in, walks over to the emergency door, make sure there's nothing wrong there. And then this other dude comes down and goes, no, these are the kids. You've got to kick them out. And they're like, oh, why do we got to go? He's like, look, I'll refund you. Why do we got to go? And then all of a sudden, like when they see the gig's up, they're dropping F-bombs. oh, you snitch, you're just a snitch, yelling at the guys who like told on them, and F you, F you, F you. And it's like, dude, seriously? So this is near some, I mean, The Matrix is kind of a long movie. So I want to say we had like an hour and a half left of the movie. And now, I mean, awesome, they're out, except this one girl who was with them. And I'm looking at these kids like it's a movie theater. It's dark. You can't really see them.
Yeah.
But they look to me like they are not even legal to drive. Like that's how young they look to me.
Yeah.
Which is almost like scarier because those are the kids that when they're that bad, they're almost worse than adults because they kind of have this mindset, you can't touch me and I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And so this one girl, like she was sitting somewhere else and then all of a sudden she starts to leave. And I don't know if it was a staff member or what was still in the theater, but just like sitting in a chair. All of a sudden he stands up, turns around and the girl's like freezes. And like, he's like, you got to go. He just like leaves. But the whole time I'm sitting there going, oh crap, dude. What if these kids are still outside the theater and they're pissed at us who got them kicked out? I'm like, oh, dude, we saw what happened to Kyle Rittenhouse. I've got a gun on me. They look like kids to me. I mean, and plus people are going to go, dude, you're 225 pounds and you look muscular. I mean, what would you be afraid? But they're like a skateboard to the head is going to kill you. Like,
yeah. Well, and you're with your son.
I'm with my 10-year-old son. I'm like
you can't be in a fist fight to defend yourself in a non-lethal manner without exposing him. Right.
Exactly.
Like,
but it's California. And I'm thinking, look at what they did to Kyle.
Yeah.
It's going to be far worse against me. And so I'm praying, God, when we get out of the movie, please let nothing go down with these kids. Just let me get out of here. And the last thing I want to do is be responsible for, shooting some kid, right? Like, I know they're just punk kids, but still, partly because of where we're at, I was literally thinking, they might be gang members or at least family is gang members because of where we were and, things that I was social clues I was picking up on. Like, yes. I'll just leave it at that. I'm like,
yes,
dude, if this is a gang thing, crap, dude, I kid you not. We get out of the theater. There's all the freaking kids. I'm like, yeah, they have no car. They had nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
And my son is like, oh, that's a good movie, except for all those people. I'm like, shh, like, zip it. Don't say a thing. Let's get to the car and get the heck out of Dodge. Yeah. It was just, oh man. But I'm telling you, man, that Kyle Rittenhouse thing has like really worried me because like we saw what they did to someone who was so obviously defending his life.
Yeah.
What are they going to do against the rest of us? And especially in states like mine,
Yeah. Yeah. For crying out loud. Kyle's situation was in a relatively, they're not an uber liberal state, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I can't even imagine what they'd want to do to you in California.
That's all I was thinking was I've just got to get the heck out of here. Let nothing go down.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll at least see me and be like, he's a big guy, but I wasn't the main guy that they had issues with. Like it was these other two guys that were sitting closer to them, but I was the guy that yelled at them because I was like, this is ridiculous at this point. These kids are just being totally obnoxious. And, so I was like, man, pick a fight with the other guys. Because I don't want this to go down, man. I do not want this to go down.
Well, it's interesting how things like that happen where generally people don't want to escalate, but there are certain circumstances in which they're not going to be rational. One of them is they're young punk kids. They are more likely to make an irrational move. Second, it sounds like culturally, it looked that there was some type of potential gang associations, which adds to the escalation. If you have witnessed violence, if it's part of what you are used to, you're more likely to make a move toward violence. And so you add those two things. And then we're also at a time where like, hey, bad kids in bad situations can get access to weapons that they're not supposed to have. It's not like at your home and my home where our kids can't easily get access to our firearms.
Right.
Right. And they've been taught safety around them anyway. And so the way one of those things where it's like, hey, probably nothing's going to happen, but also probably people are not going to come in and make such a mess and a fuss in a theater. And yet they did, which was already showing some disrespect for general cultural norms. So what else was going to happen? And those are the things where like, you got to be on high alert. Like probably nothing's going to happen, but you got to have alert.
There were girls with them. So you know how guys are when they're teenagers and they're like, girls there, they're trying to impress them. Who's going to be, let me just de-escalate the situation. You got to show that you're a badass when you're trying to impress the girls. Mm-hmm. So that all contributes, and it just like can really go bad. And I'm just sitting there going, oh man. I mean, I was so glad when they left. So glad. And my son afterwards, he goes, well, I guess we're not coming back to this theater for a while. I'm like, you got that right. I'm never coming back to Garbage Grove again, man. I'm done. But it's one of the reasons I got a 100-inch screen at my own home. And I have that movie, and I could have watched it here, but it was like, I wanted my son to have the movie going experience.
I feel
that whole thing. I'm like,
there is something fun about that experience.
Yeah.
Even when the movie's not good, and The Matrix is a good movie, but even when it's something you've seen or whatever, the experience is cool. Yeah, I'm with you. Paul, that's good job on being on alert, and glad that
I knew when I left, I was like, I don't care if they start saying stuff to me. I don't care. I'm not saying a thing. Yeah. I'm going to ignore it. I'm walking right to the car, getting in the car, and getting the heck out.
Yep.
Because if this goes down, it is not going to be good for me no matter what. I'm defending myself. Doesn't matter. It's California. I'm just like, I got to get the heck out of here.
That's where sometimes the ignoring, even if they were going to try, like you just pretend like you don't hear them. You just keep going to your car and get the heck out of there if possible. But man, what a time. Yeah. It's wild. So you brought up the Rittenhouse situation, and it's still troubling to me how far the facts were from the conversation, both from a media perspective, from a conversational thing with a lot of people. They're just blowing off a lot of the truth about it. And so with that in mind, what's going to happen in a circumstance with somebody like us? I mean, they'll railroad you in the media. They'll railroad you in the and just in person-to-person conversations. People will speak as if they know something. And I'm still amazed at people thinking that Kyle Rittenhouse had shot black people. I'm like, it was all white people. People that had assumed he'd taken a gun across state lines. Oh no, and he borrowed a gun from a friend.
As if that was illegal to take.
As if that was a problem anyway. Like people assuming that would have been a problem. And like there's so many little pieces of this, and debate as to whether or not it was wise for him to be out there. That's one thing. But when we look at the video, and some people that hadn't seen the video, people who hadn't watched the case, who hadn't watched the prosecution, and I'm like, this is just insanity that you guys think that this kid is some white supremacist who did some wicked thing here. Yeah. Anyway, that's but I don't know if you noticed now Kyle Rittenhouse apparently tried to create a gamer profile to play some game online, and his own name is blocked. So he's not allowed to create a username with his name because it's considered threatening to use Kyle Rittenhouse. And so I'm like, what in the heck? I think that was a Not the Bee article that I just saw this morning. Can you imagine, like, this dude has been canceled upon canceled for what people assume happened. And then even once the truth has come out, they don't care. They still want to push the narrative. And actually, it reminds me, it's like the opposite happening in the Jussie Smollett case. Are you following that at all?
Well, I didn't. I mean, I know he got found guilty of 5 out of 6 charges.
Yeah, but people are still acting like people are still standing by him as if he was assaulted. And it's like, this is like, we've proved in court of law that he did it. Right? Like, this is pretty, but people are like, well, it's still white supremacy that he got convicted. And I'm like, this is insanity. Yeah. You'll still push that narrative. So in both cases, they're pushing a narrative that's false, so that they can keep a certain thing going on. And trying to get that narrative going.
Yeah,
Just
no,
insanity.
it's getting crazy out there. In fact, last week, I don't remember what day it was last week, but I'm on the internet and I'm looking at this article and it says, gun shop in Garden Grove robbed. And I'm like, oh, I'll read this. Same Garbage Grove, right? Same place. And I look at the article and I'm like, dude, wait a second. That looks like Byron's gun shop. Like I go there all the time. Like, cause it's really close to my house and he's a cool guy and I want to support his business. And sure enough, dude, in the middle of the night, I think it was like 1 or 2 in the morning. I don't know if it was 2 guys or 2 cars, 2 BMWs show up, smash the door, get in, steal 40 guns and get out in 2 minutes. And so Byron, my buddy, knows him really well. And so he went to go see him the next day because he was supposed to bring a gun in anyway. And, here in California, we don't get to do private party transfers. So that safe probably had a bunch of guns that were on hold for private party transfers. California requires a 10-day hold, even on private parties. Doesn't matter if you've already owned a gun, doesn't matter any of that. Every gun, 10-day hold. And so part of those, I'm sure, were private party transfers. And so my buddy goes in and talks to him. He goes, yeah, the whole thing happened in 2 minutes. He goes, it shows up on my phone. Someone smashes the door. I immediately call 911. I get in my car. I'm breaking stoplights. I mean, I'm just doing everything to get there as quickly as I can. They're gone in 2 minutes. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, then it had to have been somehow related to an inside job, because how do you get into the safe in 2 minutes unless you know the code? And I guess there's some like master key or whatever to get into the safe. And he's like, it could have been a master, whatever it is. And then the problem is, okay, well, they still would have had to have known what kind of safe it was to have this master. So anyway, they follow the BMWs, which by the way, were stolen as well. So the BMWs were stolen. They follow them on the freeway up the 405 all the way up into LA. And I guess they lose them up in LA. But I'm thinking in the back of my head, okay, of all the things to steal, every one of those guns, they know the serial number on, right? Because it's already been entered with whoever gets the 4473 info. And, California, they got to do the background check. You enter it with the serial number, all that stuff. So, I mean, it's already been entered in the system. They know what those guns are. So, I mean, anytime one of those guns pops anywhere, they're going to very easily be able to trace it back to this sale or to this theft. And of course, that doesn't mean the guy who uses the gun later is the guy who stole it. But then, okay, we're trying to find out who stole all these guns. Give it up. Honestly, I'm thinking in the back of my head, excuse me, wouldn't it make more sense to steal all the magazines? I mean, walk in the store and just whoosh, take all those magazines and get the heck out. Those are untraceable, practically worth cash here in California. You could turn around and sell them on the internet for like pennies and you'd never get caught. Like, wouldn't that make more? I guess, it's not about making sense, right?
Yeah. Very seldom are these guys thinking these things through. It's always interesting to me. Like I remember I'm talking to somebody, and we'll just keep this vague as possible, that they were a juror on a murder trial and it was over a robbery of a gas station. And this is back like the early 90s or whatever. Like think about like a gas station just wouldn't be carrying that much cash. Like you might be getting $100-$150, like, but it was like, it just wasn't that much there. And of course, they have a whole protocol for things going in the safe, taken away. Like they just don't keep that much cash on hand. So guy goes in there, robs convenience store, ends up, not a convenience store at a gas station, ends up shooting a guy. So now he's got a murder rap. And I think it was maybe 200 and change that was like actually being stolen. And it's like the punishment for the theft is going to be a whole lot, like it's kind of a risk reward thing. Put aside the morality of it all. It's just not worth it for the risk, know, that's just never made sense to me. Yeah. And of course, in that situation, as I understand, the guy lost his life. And it's also like, you're going to kill somebody over over a couple of $100. Like that's
Right.
ridiculous. Now in the 90s, it would have been more like, $200 would have been closer to, I don't know, $600, but it's nothing.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy how things are getting out there for sure.
Yeah. It's and related to this, some of these places that are they're beginning to increase the budgets for their police departments in some of these cities that were calling for the defunding of police before. And I'm like, yeah, duh. Or in some of these, I don't know if you saw LA County, man, LA Police Department was actually telling tourists not to come because they're not.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it was one detective. I mean, and he's on Fox News. So it's like, yeah, of course, that's what he's going to say.
Yes.
I don't necessarily believe it, but
yeah,
I mean, he's going to say what he's going to say because he's on Fox News. So,
this is a good point. Considering context is a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, messy things happening out there, man.
It is. And you wanted to bring up our esteemed Governor Gavin Newsom and what he wants to do.
Oh my. Yes. So related to all of this. So a lot of you guys know about the Texas, and it's not technically an abortion ban, but effectively it is. And of course, I'm really pro-life. I don't think you should be able to murder people, regardless of where their location is, whether they're in their mother or not. We could go on that a whole long time. Feel free to shoot us a message. We'd be happy to discuss it, but I can give you reasons for that. That's not what this is about today. But essentially what's happened here is the Texas law looks to be on fairly sturdy ground. And as a result, Gavin Newsom is making a case against it effectively and saying,
well, explain what the law is. Explain what the Texas law is.
The Texas law essentially, there's a couple of things involved in it. One, it effectively bans abortion after around 6 weeks, which a lot of women won't know they're pregnant before that. So it becomes effectively an abortion ban, pretty close to it at least. But built into, like, the law actually has teeth. So if a woman gets an abortion and you help her do it, like, there's an aiding and abetting clause to this whole thing that you can get in trouble for helping. So let's say I don't know the details of it, but if you are performing the abortion or if you're supporting in it somehow, you can get in trouble. So Gavin Newsom is essentially trying to pull that together and make an aiding and abetting thing built into an anti-gun law. So essentially he wants to allow Californians to sue people who, this is the quote, he says, "We'll let Californians sue those who put ghost guns and assault weapons on our street." So he's essentially trying to make a way for people to sue, because in the abortion ban, you can sue somebody for taking part in an abortion, which is interesting to me. There's a little bit of teeth in that law. And so he's trying to get some news, honestly, is what he's trying to do. And be anti-gun. It's allowing him to be his woke self and, he managed to get a jab in against pro-life people and pro-gun people at the same time. And
what's funny is California has some of the biggest ghost gun manufacturers. Mm-hmm. I mean, 80% Arms is really close to me. I think they're like in Santa Ana, California, or something like that. I mean, it's Orange County. I know they're in Orange County somewhere. They might even be in Garbage Grove for all I know. But it's like they're one of the biggest ghost gun manufacturers out there. And I mean, he does not care about the revenue that they bring in, for sure. He doesn't care.
Yeah. Well, think about all these things that are happening where the left continues to double down on things that are not working. Blocking the pipeline, gas prices go up, inflation goes up. They're still taxing like crazy. They're still throwing inflation at everything. They're making a mess over everything, and they don't care. Like, it doesn't work, but they're operating on their own twisted principles. And so I don't think they care. It's not about what works for them. It's not about what's right for them. It's about what they want to do.
Yeah. It's very much a dictatorship. I mean, that's really what they want to go to. It's like if they could get rid of the republic as a whole, they absolutely would. But at the same time, I kind of believe the Republicans would do that as well if they could. And, you know, the old line from Abraham Lincoln, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the way I see it. Like, yeah,
unless you're perfectly righteous God himself, you are going to be corrupted. Yeah. Well, have you seen the documentary How to Be a Dictator on Netflix?
I've seen it, but I haven't watched it.
It's not bad. It's pretty. And actually, I was surprised because they call out a whole heck of a lot of communism in that. And I'm like, Netflix, do you know what you're doing here? But they talked about there was an idea in under the Stalin regime that things had to, like, you had to do things in a Soviet way, right? And so there were Soviet scientists that had ideas about growing grain and whatever, and they were doing stuff that was just pseudoscience. It was like, well, if we freeze this stuff at this time, and it's like, well, you're freezing out your crops. But they had this idea that, like, if we planted before it freezes, it would make it hardier. And it was like, no, you're just killing the crops. And so it wasn't working, but they didn't care because it was Soviet. Like, it was implementing Marxist principles into farming. And so it was good because it was Marxist. And so they were ruining crops. Like, they were not producing enough food, and like massive starvation is happening, but they kept doubling down on it because it was Marxist, and Marxist equaled right to them. And it was really interesting to see. You had the combination of centralized power, you have this dictatorship, but then there's an ideology that was tied to it. And so it would have looked bad for his dictatorship to give up the ideology, even though it wasn't working. So he kept doubling down. And really interesting, like terrible, hideous, but, you know, it's basically we're watching the exact same thing happening right now. Yeah. Think about all the things that, all the ways that they're handling, you know, gas prices, handling everything else, and they just make it worse, but they don't care. It's about their own twisted principles. Yeah, what a mess. Which even comes back to the whole thing with Gavin Newsom. You and I make decisions based on principles. We presuppose a biblical worldview, and we have ethics that guide us and protect. And so there are certain things that, even as we're applying what we believe is the right thing, we have guidelines based on what God's word says. So, like, you know, it's like we talk about, you know, we like our guns, but I'm not going to shoot a guy over trying to steal my car because I value human life more than I value that car. Even though you could make a case that I'm justified, but I'm not going to do that. Like, I care more. So we have these principles.
In certain states, it would be legal to do that.
Yeah. We have certain principles that guide us on this, but imagine, like, these are people coming from a framework and a worldview that begins with the idea that God doesn't exist, that objective ethics do not exist. And so it's all really about what power they can get and how they can implement their view. And so they'll lie, they'll change things because there's not a basis underneath it for any type of ethics. And they'll say there is, but they're not living that way. They don't really believe that. And yeah. Anyway, crazy mess there.
Yep.
So, yeah. Do you want to talk about something fun really quick before we jump off here?
Yeah.
So you guys know that I'm becoming more and more of a Canik fan. And I don't know, did you ever get any Canik pistols, Pete?
I don't even know what that is.
You don't know what a Canik is? So Canik is generally known as the Turkish Glock. Okay. Canik is...
It's probably not on our roster here. I probably couldn't get it.
Oh, that's why. I'm sorry, Pete. I don't mean to rub it in when you can't get something. I genuinely forget.
I'm going to leave, okay? I will be out of here.
So, like, I think you should think about getting this thing.
I got my ATF Form 1 ready to go on my short barrel rifle and my suppressor.
Party on, man. So I'm just gonna give some attention to this. I had seen this gun. First of all, background on Caniks. Caniks they're considered the Turkish Glock. Century Arms imports them. They are a very high quality gun that doesn't have the ubiquity of the Glock name. And so what they tend to do is trick out these guns. The quality is, I would say, same level as a Glock, not as prolific. So if you want parts from it, it's a little bit harder to get parts. Whereas, like, you know, if things went down and I needed parts to a Glock, like, probably the guy next to me in the foxhole could give me the slide off of his, right? Like, You don't have that benefit with the Canics, but what Canic does is take things that generally people like to do to their Glocks, improve trigger, a little bit better barrel, flared magwell, all these little like different kind of sights, like, putting incandescent sights on it, all those little things that people tend to do to trick it out. And they'll generally put that on and have it come standard. Right. So what ends up happening is you pay about what you would for a Glock, but you got all these things that would normally be aftermarket on it. So it allows you, and if you, you'll find a pretty nice Canic for $400. Like, that's pretty great. So Canic is just recently released this thing. And TP9 is like kind of their classic Canic in 9mm. It's a classic gun. They've got a lot of other ones. One other little side note I like about Canic is that all of their guns, all of their pistols have oversized ambidextrous slide locks. And so, like, no matter what you're doing, man, you want to clear a jam, you want to handle that, like, you left-handed, right-handed, and it's oversized. Like, it's just cool. I like it. Anyway, this TP9, it's called a TP9. That's their classic, but it's the TP9 Elite Combat Executive. And everything about this gun is just cool, man. They've got a little Cerakoting gold on the interior of the interior of the slide. It just looks really cool. Nice little accent marks. Everything on it is like, you got your threaded barrel, match grade. It's nitrate coated, black polymer on the outside. Everything just looks cool. Suppressor ready. And I forget what kind of trigger it is in it, but it's a really nice trigger. I'm not remembering, but man, the thing's just a beast, and the whole thing's $800. I'm seeing it's $780 is their MSRP on it. So great gun. If you can get your hand on that, it's just a cool gun. Flared magwell and everything. I just dig it. It's big enough that you could use for competitive shooting. Small enough if you wanted to carry it. You could be a little bit big for a carry, but anyway, check it out. It just looks cool too. Highly recommend it.
That's awesome. It's funny. Yeah. You just made me think when I was watching The Matrix yesterday. I thought it was funny. All the agents are shooting Desert Eagles, and I'm like, kind of overkill, right? But whatever. It's a movie. And then there's this one scene where Neo is using, I don't know what the gun is, but it's 9mm. Like, you can tell by the magazine that it's a 9mm, submachine gun is what it looks like. Yeah. And they show the scene where all the casings are hitting the ground, right? And I'm like, those are 5.56 casings. That doesn't fit the gun. What are you doing? And you can tell that Keanu Reeves hasn't trained for John Wick yet, because he's got horrible trigger control. Like, his fingers always on the bang stick. It's like, dude, come on, man. Yeah, that's awesome. He hasn't done John Wick yet, so he hasn't learned. Yeah, he learned when he learned. He learned well.
I wonder if he looks back and like if he ever watches The Matrix and cringes, because I've had a couple of times where I looked back at a picture. I found one time a picture of me holding a gun with my finger on the trigger. And I'm aimed up. I'm following 2 out of the 3 safety rules.
And see, that's kind of the thing, right? It's checks and balances. It is.
And I looked at that picture and I'm like, this is embarrassing. Like, I'm cringing. Or it's what Calvinists do when they look back at posts that they did before they were Calvinists. They're like, oh, I can't believe I said that before. That's how we do, man. So but check out that Canic. If you get the chance, get yourself to a range, test out a Canic, see how it feels. Talk to a guy. I actually talked to the guy at Century Arms that was their rep, and of course he's going to talk him up. But one thing that was really interesting to me, he wasn't talking about the executive that we were just talking. He says, listen, he's like, most major firearm manufacturers are testing to the same level that Glock does. They're running 20, 30,000 rounds through them, and they're testing well. Generally, he didn't say this, but he's pretty much like, unless you're getting a high point or some crap like that, he's like, you're going to get a gun that works well. So like, a lot of people are making pretty high quality guns. Like, the quality of manufacturing has come a long way in most gun manufacturers. And he wasn't going to make specifics, but he gave the idea, like, if you're getting a major brand, it's going to be good. He said, however, every one of these things is a machine, and a machine has the potential to fail. And that's where he made that case for the oversized slide locks. He's like, man, in an urgent situation, this makes you a whole lot faster at clearing a jam, at handling a situation. And I'm like, I can get on board with that. Plus, it just looks cool and it's ambidextrous. And you'll notice when you pick one up, there's all these little small things. You're like, oh, that was like they have rounded, like their iron sights are rounded. So so what's in front is a circle that lines up with a U-shaped rather than, straight up and down iron sights. And it just kind of just looks nice. There's just something kind of cool and classy about every little bit of it. Let's check out Can It, guys.
Nice.
Yeah, man. Anything else, Pete, that we should?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks. Good to have you guys on here. Check out Lake Erie Arms. We have not started, as far as I know, we have not started selling memberships yet. We're in the process of doing the building, but memberships coming soon for the new Gun-Tree Club. Excited about that. So check out learms.net, and our Christmas sale is still running with some wonderful, wonderful deals. So get on out there, man. We even got night vision.
Nice.
Yeah, buddy.
Cool. All right, everybody. We'll be back next week. We'll talk to you then. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
You've been listening to the From Concealment Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams. Be sure to tune in next week for more gun talk. Also, check out the From Concealment website for more shooting-related goodness at FromConcealment.com.